So we will follow with our program. So if you remember, we left this morning the paper on Amphora contents and shipwrecks. So it will be the first one now. So we have with us Franca Cibeccini and George Koutsouplakis, who will talk about what we can find doing underwater archaeology. Okay, so thank you very much. You have the word.
Good morning or good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me here. Actually, when I realized that the whole conference was in English, I was taken by surprise. And now you will have to put up with my bad English. I'm sorry for you. Désolé. Okay. Then I would like to start by saying that I will try to evoke a range of issues and problems open to stimulate debate. Moreover, many of the themes and subjects that converge in this dissertation have been or will be treated in a specific way in special sessions, such as the epigraphic or recycling container, to which you can refer for further detailed analysis. Yes. So why are shipwrecks so important when we talk about contents? The question may seem a banal one or even a little stupid, but I think that it's important to clarify, first of all, what are the strengths, sometimes the exclusiveness, of data collected thanks to this kind of archaeological context. In my opinion, two are the main aspects. First of all, the good conservation condition of artifacts and materials in general in underwater sites. This is true not only for shipwrecks, but also for all underwater contexts, especially for rivers and lakes submerged sites, or in the case of ancient underwater sites, such as ancient harbor or anchorage today on wetland. The second aspect is that shipwreck is a closed context. I think there is no need to insist on the better conservation of artifacts and material, especially of the so-called perishable materials in underwater sites. I will just briefly recall some main contributions of this type of contest. We only need to remember the famous image of wine flowing from an amphora Dressel 1 of the shipwreck of the Madrague des Jeans, the cover of André Chernia's monograph on wine of Roman Italy. We can remember also another well-known image, the hands full of fish bone of Bernard Liu on the South Lavezzi II wreck. Indeed, it is largely thanks to wrecks that we acquired the first certainty about the content of some form of amphora. Again, in the history of the research on amphora, one can mention the determination of the presence of wine in Amphora Lambolia II in precedence believed to contain olive oil, again, thanks to the Madrague des Jeans. More recently, the image of Amphora Lambolia II or Dressel 6 full of pitch from the South Cabo 1 suggested, without shadow of doubt, that there were recycled containers. Beyond the well-known cases, I would like to mention a few cases where unexpected contents were discovered in wrecks or, more generally, in submerged sites. Unexpected, such as olive pits and pitch in some Etruscan amphora, P12, usually containing wine, in the archaic wreck of Giglio Island. I know that is too old for you, but it's quite important, so I want to remember this case. Or unexpected, such the volcanic sand and different kind of fruits on the wreck San Rossore Bay in Pisa, contained again in Lambolia II wine amphora. But the trace of the contents may be less obvious, though visible, as in the case of the cork of a Greco-Italic amphora soaked in wine residues recovered at Puntone di Scarlino, in a site which has been explained as the result of a clean-up of the hold of a merchant ship. Residues of wine were invisible on the cork, but have left eloquent trace of purple on the white clothes in which the cork was warped just out of the water. Concerning the determination of the content, we have to stress the importance of a careful study and of the sieve of the contained material, even when this seems apparently to be unimportant. A good sampling procedures and the correct storage of the object once out of the water are equally important. I think that there is no need to insist on the fact that on some artifacts from submerged sites that we have discovered for the first time the evidence of the trace of pitch coating the interior of different types of containers. The presence or absence of this pitch trace had led archaeologists to speculate about the possibility to determine the different contents on this basis between solid and liquid content, and in this case, especially between oil and wine. Today, thanks to the chemical analysis, we know that the practice of coating containers with pitch was a common one and extended to all kinds of containers, including those for oil. Nicolas Garnier will certainly talk more in detail about this subject. For my part, I would simply like to stress that for underwater archaeologists, this recent discovery is not upsetting, fortunately, for indeed no visible trace of pitch in a container from an underwater site remains an important clue for the presence of oil. Again, yes, in the next session is dedicated to inscription, so I will just recall the fundamental contribution of underwater archaeology to the corpus of titoli picti, quoting a number of new case studies. I don't need to stress anymore the exceptional conservation of artifacts and especially of painted inscription of the submerged site in the Rhône rivers at Arles. André Chernia is just speaking a lot about Lacatum, so only to show these images to remember the really very good condition of preservation of material in the Rhône River. And I would like to thank also David Jawi for the data provided, often unpublished. The Rhône underwater excavation of the last years has shown us that an incredible quantity of objects, sometimes unsuspected, could bear painted inscription. The quantity of painted inscription recovered on Betica's amphora from for fish products seems to confirm the hypothesis of some scholars of a systematic presence of these inscriptions, which are fragile and that have been preserved only in special cases. But also in archaeology there is a problem. The excavation of the Roman Greek, both rare in Spain, in Valencia region, seems to contradict or at least mitigate these hypotheses. About 300 of amphora, Dressel 711, have been recovered from this wreck, which is under excavation since 2006. None of them bear painted description, not even the numerous amphorae taken during the last 2 years campaign, coming from the deeper layers and perfectly preserved. You can see in the slide that we have only only 2 amphora with cartels. I don't know the name in English. Labels like the preparation for the inscription, but without no trace of inscription, and also these also in very, very well preserved amphora, like you can see in the last in contact of wood, where you have lots of sarmentos. Little branch of wood and some drops of pitch are visible, so very, very well preserved. To stay in this exceptional wreck, I would like to give a methodological remark and tell an anecdote. All the amphora in the first layer were filled with a great amount of seashell. These shells were less present in the second layer and almost inexistent in the third and better preserved layer of the cargo. Sometimes the shells were clearly very old and their percentage in the amphora really important. You have here a nice selection. Nevertheless, the possibility that it was a trade of seafood or something like that, has never been taken into account, although this hypothesis has been suggested by other scholars during several conferences or seminars. The gradual sifting of a representative sample of amphorae, even of the first layer, and the analysis of the remains made by Gaël Pic, there is a poster on this subject, or you can ask to him, have clearly shown that the amphorae were filled with a fairly thin fish sauce. Leaving aside for the moment the results of the content analysis, we were already sure that it was not a seafood transport. In fact, any underwater archaeologist who has a good field experience, at least in the Mediterranean, know that this phenomenon is fairly frequent and that is a fairly simple explanation. Octopus. This cephalopod loves to nest in amphora, jar or similar containers, which is a very bad habit for him from time to time, and that is the origin of a traditional way of fishing that is still practiced in Tunisia. The octopus also loves to bring home food and souvenirs, the latter especially to cover the entrance of his home. This typical attitude of octopus not only explains the abundant presence of shells in the amphora, but it may be the cause of some fairly curious presence inside of these containers. So we should always be very careful to the archaeological and environmental context and to its documentation, as we have just said this morning. We must always bear in mind that the contents of an amphora found in the sea may have been contaminated even in very old times, and I don't speak about the intervention of man, of divers, only natural contamination. It is essential to look carefully an object recovered from underwater site, especially if the context shows some anomalies. We know that a reused container could be identified thanks to the combination of 2-3 features like marks, user-wear, and hapled marks like graffiti, problem of association of the object, a great heterogeneity, and so on. And this even before analysis or the sifting of the content. A great number of data comes from ancient underwater excavation. Still in the 80 and 90 years, the procedures of sampling or even desalting the ceramics container were quite rare. Moreover, these containers from old excavation have been moved several times, sometimes broken. In all cases, they have been abundantly manipulated. That means contaminated. Nevertheless, this container can still be fruitfully questioned if samples are collected with a suitable precaution, as also demonstrated by some recent projects which have involved TRAS, Michel Bonifay, and private research, like mainly Nicolas Garnier, but it's not only the one. Yes. We can also quote the analysis made on some Vatican amphorae from Sud Perduto 2 and especially Sud Lavezzi 2, but I don't want to speak about the problem of the content of wine. We have just spoken about this morning. I evoke these cases only to stress that 1 or 2 analyses cannot allow us to really answer a fundamental question. Is this an exceptional case, more or less isolated, or is it a particular form or variant produced in a particular period in a given geographical area to transport an unusual content, unusual for us? We don't know if it was really unusual in the past. Without suggesting that all the amphora of a wreck should be analyzed, shows that will be very expensive, I tell that only with a proper amount of samples selected in a reasoned way, we could answer all these questions convincingly. Oh, yes. I thought about the dating and composition of the cargo. I don't want to lose many times. I would just like to mention a wreck recently discovered and documented at very great depth. It is a cargo of Greco-Italic amphora dating at the beginning of the 2nd century before Christ, intact. In this wreck, as in this cargo, as you can see, there is also a tubular amphora. And this association with Greco-Italic allows us to raise now the start date of this form at least 25-40 years. Donc, for this, je pense que c'est assez intéressant de voir comment nos datations aussi, quand elles sont bien établies avec beaucoup de sources et beaucoup de repères scientifiques, ils peuvent bouger avec de nouvelles découvertes, on le sait, mais bon. C'est pour ça que les épaves sont vraiment importants comme close context, et I think that we have to be more for the wreck, pour les épaves, aujourd'hui, plutôt que contre les épaves. Je ne vois pas André, mais I think that now we can really be with for the shipwrecks. I will recall only one case about the association of artifacts. The Dolia shipwrecks. Since the early study in the 70s, it was assumed that this large jar contained wine on the basis of the systematic association of Dolia with wine amphora, especially Dresser 2-4, and for the presence of a coating of pitch. This hypothesis, endorsed by most scholars, has been confirmed in recent years by chemical analysis carried out on the pitch that made it possible to exclude the transport of fish sauce and oil. So it's not definitive. We have not found wine trace, but I think that it's quite enough. It is important also to determine the function of a container, if it is a part of the cargo, principal or secondary, or instead an object used on board by sailors, and if this is its first use or if it is reused. There is a great variability of interpretation, as we can have seen before. We move from small batch to fully charged ship. We move from small batch to fully charged ship with recycled container, a system which involves a significant organization and raises the question of in which case and why we decide to recycle one or more types of container to carry something different from the original content. I want to stress only one thing. Some studies affirm that we can explain the reuse of container because, I quoted, maybe there was no specific amphora production. I think that this assumption is not fully satisfactory. I don't need to evoke the Grado shipwrecks. It's well known and we have speak a lot about it. I only want to say that in this in this cargo composed by recycled amphora, there was also a local production, a production of Adriatic Sea area, and this, the same area is really, really well known as a production area for amphora from the Republic to the High Imperial period, for example, the Lamboya II or the Dressel 6. And even more obvious is the case of the Sud Cavaux 1 wreck. The pitch contained in the Lamboya II Dressel 6 seems to come from an area well known for amphora production, the Tarraconensis region, as shown even by the wine amphoret Tarraconensis 1A and B, which complete this cargo. So why they use another recycled amphora? It's not because they have not amphora, for me, or not so systematically. No, I jump it. No, let's see through. Pardon. There is another thing that, no, I will say it. In this case, was it perhaps a desire not to use a type of container too closely associated to the wine transport in a specific time, or more simply, all containers, normally not older than a dozen years, were reused for a secondary trade? This is one question. And there is another thing that intrigue me. Sud Cavo 1 and the San Rossore Beo Rex are almost contemporary. They are both fully or quite fully charged ship with recycled containers. And in both wrecks, these containers are Lamboia 2 amphorae, certainly not the most common amphorae that could be found between the Tyrrhenian coast and Marseille. Finally, about reuse of container, again, the Rhone River underwater excavation provide us with new data on the reuse of amphorae and the trade of material hitherto little known. Again, chemical analysis has an essential role. This analysis, realized on 4 African amphorae of Ostia 59 type, indicate that disparate presence of Ben oil and sometimes wine and milk in these amphorae. I don't know if Nicolas Garnier will speak about this, but in any case, I only want to say that the presence of Ben oil is of particular interest, as the natural range of Moringa oil tree in Africa does not cover the area where the amphora's production is supposed to be located, Africa proconsularis. Moreover, the interpretation of Pompeii painted description, and you can ask to Professor Bonifay for more details, leads to consider that the primary contents of Ostia 59 could be olives preserved in brine. Ben oil should be seen as secondary contents, and its presence allow the authors to reconstruct a complex redistribution trade circuit. Et je vais le dire en français, encore une fois, j'y tiens à remercier David Jaoui pour sa générosité, pour m'avoir permis de vous communiquer des données qui sont ou inédites ou en cours au surprise. We discuss, I know that you are interested in Amphora, but we discuss it almost only about Amphora, but they are not the only containers we know for ancient trade. I should mention again the Rhone River recent underwater research, where the excellent conservation conditions allow new chemical research on organic content. I'm talking about some small pots with 2 handles called podulatium in French. I don't know if they have an English name. The number of specimens found in the Rhone, 60, has led to the hypothesis that they were not a part of the commercial cargo, but more probably they were in use on board for the nourishment of the sailors. Even more interesting, talking about amphorae, is the discovery of a titoli picti on a particular object called amphorisco, believed to be a particular type of amphora stopper, or less frequently, a container for perfumed oil. A new titulus pictus from the Arles Rhone underwater excavation opened a new and unsuspected possibility of content. This is the only case, known to me, of a painted inscription on this kind of object. The inscription, still under study by David Jaoui, could bear the name of a plant, suggesting that the content was a preparation based on this plant, perhaps for medical use. Surely, this inscription seems to confirm that this object should be interpreted as a little container rather than a very particular type of amphora stoppers. Curiously, none of the numerous little amphoriscos retrieved in the site of the ship of Pisa has revealed titoli picti, and I think that everyone knows the excellent conservation of the artifacts coming from this excavation. All the recent cases mentioned above show also the importance to pay attention to this kind of study and analysis with a rigorous methodology and documentation. My conclusion, in recent years, DRA's research project focused on great deep wreck. Our priority was to document those sites, mainly by photogrammetry and 3D restitution. We have erased, for the moment, only few and well-chosen artifacts. The next step, already been tested, involves the development of robotic excavation technique, which should be compatible with scientific principles of archaeology. I want to conclude my speech by evoking the important wealth of these wrecks and the incredible mass of data on the ancient trade that they can provide if properly approached. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So now it's the time for the discussion.
Hello. I would like first of all to thank Franca Cibeccini for the most profound overview of the present state of knowledge about the content of the Amphora and the contribution of shipwrecks to this kind of study. Franca Cibeccini, I pronounce well the name, I hope, focused on the best two known qualities of shipwrecks. First, the excellent state of preservation of Amphora originating from shipwrecks, and second, to the wreck's unique identity as closed context, which gives us the chance to study in detail the synchronicity of certain types, to define what can be considered as main or secondary cargo and seclude items that might undergo secondary use. I will try to enrich her overview with some exceptional cases from Greece, which is the space I work for the last 20 years. Also, I will try to play the devil's advocate for a bit, and hopefully there will be enough time for discussion. So, what do we find basically inside amphoras that are recovered from shipwrecks? There are traces from the immediate environment of the wrecks. Most usual things are sand, pebbles, stones, shells, and dead marine life. I will start first with the shells. Shells is the most common let's say, live organism that enters the amphoras. This is Balba rugosa, which is extremely popular in amphoras that are recovered in the Aegean Sea. It is found in quite great numbers. I counted once 92 examples from the interior of a Koan amphora. But since it's not eatable, we can't presume that it was a trade item. Second is the Chlemis family of shells, again found in great numbers. And as we move towards, then we're going to see many examples of the Murex family. Here it is where it gets more complicated, because we have some examples of amphora retrieved, not from shipwrecks, isolated finds. This is an amphora spotted in 2012. As an isolated find, and it had concreted inside a big mass of squashed shells. We were able to chisel out some pieces and give it to an expert, and it says, okay, it's from the Murex family. The immediate environment of this amphora didn't present, let's say, sediments that had the same substance. So probably squashed shells were carried inside this amphora. The shells don't get in the interior of amphora only by octopus. Octopus has been accused for quite many things in underwater archaeology. I believe that some shells have the tendency to colonize the interior of amphora. An example outstanding is this Cumatium parthenopeum that it was found inside this amphora. This is an amphora that was retrieved from the sea in the early stages of my career. It's in the early 90s. We emptied all the interior of the amphora, but something always stayed in. It was impossible to get it out. We could hear this shell rattling in the interior of the amphora for quite many years when we were transporting the amphora from storeroom to storeroom. In the end, this amphora broke in the earthquakes of '99, and out of it came this shell, which is extremely large. There is no way to put it from the neck inside, and it is clear evidence that, you know, shells colonize the inside of amphoras, and they prosper, they thrive, and they grow larger to an extent that they can't get it out. And this is not the only example. We have quite a good collection of amphoras in the storerooms with shells that we can't possibly get them out. Now, talking about dead marine life, we should be very careful when we deal from amphoras originating from shipwrecks. This is a photo that was shooted just a week ago from research. It's a shipwreck in the area of Furni. Furni is a tiny island between Ikaria and Samos. We made a survey for the last 2 weeks there. The shipwreck is in a depth of 55 meters. We decided to raise a sample, and it was the amphora you see down in the picture that is in an almost vertical position. We started cleaning the amphora. In the first level, there was just sand and nothing else. And suddenly, after the middle of the amphora, first let me tell you, it's not an amphora we see often in Greece. We had also some difficult time to recognize it. It is a Zist 72 or variant of Zist 75 typology. It's an amphora made in the Black Sea. It's probably not circulated much in the Western Mediterranean. So, excavating the inside of the amphora in the lab, we had shells of crayfish coming out in a small quantity. As we removed, we dig deeper inside the amphora, we started finding lumps of this crayfish. This is not Homarus gammarus, this is not Palinurus vulgaris, this is not any kind of shrimp that is known in the Aegean. So probably it was the commodity that was transported in this kind of amphora. And in this way, we were able to confirm an old theory expressed in an article a few years ago by Daniel Opé, who insisted, based on historical evidence, that this kind of amphora was used for the transportation of crayfish from the area of Sinope, and that crayfish was one of the main staples of that area that was for exportation. Another exceptional case was found also in the shipwreck near Makronissos. The main cargo was Tripolitanian 1 amphoras that were dated in the 2nd century AD. Inside the cargo, there was also a sample, a complete amphora of Lambolia 2. Lambolia 2, we raised the sample up, so it's this amphora you see here. The pike in the bottom of the amphora was cut, and there was a vertical hole inside the amphora. It was strange, first of all, to find this amphora in a shipwreck that was dated at least 100 or 200 years later than this specific amphora. Then we started, these are the Tripolitanian 1 samples we raised. We started cleaning the interior of the amphora, and we came across a very nice collection of bones. There's a zoologist that studied them. He said they are from goats. You see ribs, you see basically bones of the lower part of the legs, and also a couple of teeth, which means also the head of the animal was butchered and put inside the amphora. This is very rare to find such evidence in terrestrial sites. Another exceptional case is the case of Gunsenin 2 type of amphora that was recovered from a wreck 3 years ago from northern Sporades. This amphora was found turned upside down with a lower part towards the surface. It had sand inside. We cleaned the side and then we put it in a desalination tank. And suddenly we noticed that there is something greasy pouring out of the mouth of the amphora. there was no any kind of special analysis, but we could say, I was a witness to that, that it was oil because it had a very, very strong smell in the room. This was the amphora raised. Now, I would like to make some comments about the use of pitch and the use of resin. Although my knowledge was enriched during the first day of this Congress here, talking to many experts, in amphoras of the classical period, we don't find pitch inside. We just find traces of resin that are basically concentrated in the base of the amphora. This is a photograph from the mouth of the amphora, and here's the resin you find in the very bottom. It is always there. It seems that this resin was put on the amphora. It was concentrated and then very soon solidified in the bottom of the amphora. So it stayed there no matter what the inclination of the pot was on the sea floor. We start seeing pitched examples of amphora from Roman and basically from the late Roman times. This is an example from a late Roman II amphora, which is clearly pitched in all the surface inside. Okay, I'm aware now about the fact that almost every amphora was pitched in Antiquity, and that pitch might be there in the interior wallings of the amphora, even if you can't see them. So also all this old debate if pitch has to is an evidence of the transport of wine or oil. We have to talk about this again and again. From what it seems, chemical analysis and DNA analysis, which will be the subject of the next sessions of this Congress, will give a final solution about the commodities that are transported in specific shapes of amphoras. But still, there is a view dominating all the amphora studies that specific shapes are connected with specific commodities, that specific shapes have been chosen in order to, let's say, accommodate specific liquids. And I will finish about some things concerning the research of shipwrecks in Greece. Still, the greatest number that, of amphoras that are entering our department of underwater archaeology in the Ministry of Culture, there are amphoras that have no specific context. We do not excavate shipwrecks in Greece anymore, but we have to deal with quite a great number of amphoras that entering the department every year. Most of them are or delivered by fishermen or just confiscated by the police. I would like in these procedures of this conference also to have a talk about the politics that have to be followed concerning isolated finds, and also to, let's say, establish a pan-Mediterranean protocol about how we handle a great number of amphoras, especially in countries like Greece, where the income of amphoras is outstanding any ability to facilitate them. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much to both of you for these so well illustrated papers with many news, with many questions. And now you have the word. Maybe an interesting question could be if somebody working in your field has decided to try to update the Parker's catalog that we still use when we are looking for shells for strange things.
some years ago, but I'm not sure that they have done it. I don't know. We should look probably in Oxford, not in France, at my connaissance.
But it's funny because it also appeared this morning in some papers that we still read ancient bibliography mentioning scales, bones, near the amphora, inside the amphora, but we don't know how accurate this information is. And another interesting thing, at least for me, is that each time that I see an underwater presentation, there are many news unknown to the scientific community. So maybe one interesting idea for this international project could be to try to update, to have a corpus, a Mediterranean corpus of cargoes.
Could be very interesting if we will arrive to have an update, effectivement, of Parker or something only with the new wrecks from the 90, because it was 92, if I remember well, to recent times. It's not easy because you have to coordinate a lot of people who work in the sea. And I don't know, but for example, in Italy, they are not part of only one institution, like in French. In French, at least it's easier because you have one institution where you have all the information is more or less concentrated. I think in Greece too, in Italy, for example, it's completely different. You have to ask to every superintendenza, to the university, so there are a lot of people who have the information, but could be more difficult. And Spain, probably less difficult. You have some region, so probably it's easier, but surely it will be very, very interesting.
Well, if I make a comment, here, it's sure that Parker's catalog needs to be revised. First of all, because a lot of stuff has been found after the 92 that it was published, but also for a secondary reason, and this concerns mainly the catalog of Greek shipwrecks he had in his book. In absence of scientific data, he based too much information on let's say, local newspapers. And, this information was afterwards distributed to the scientific community, and it was not always correct. I tried to make a full list of the shipwrecks in the Greek territorial waters that we can claim that we know to a certain extent. This was announced in a Congress in Brussels 2 years ago. So when the publication comes out, there will be at least a revised version of the Greek, the shipwrecks of the Greek territorial waters. But okay, this work is incomplete if you don't have also data from the other side of the Aegean, which is Asia Minor, modern Turkey. You can speak about the Aegean if you refer only to wrecks of Greek territorial waters. And there is a difficulty to, find evidence if, in the Turkish, lots of information is published in Turkish language, which, I don't know Turkish. This is something that it has to be done in cooperation from scientists of many Mediterranean countries as to achieve a good result. And okay, let's face also the reality. It's there won't be any total final number of shipwrecks in the Mediterranean, or if it happens one day, it won't be very soon. So you have to release new catalogs every once in a while, let's say every 5 or 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Some questions? Rui Moraes?
No, the question, I believe should include also the Atlantic route
Yeah.
and the shipwrecks from the Atlantic. Also together with the shipwrecks. So the Atlantic should be included. Because you cannot understand the Roman trade without the Atlantic.
Let's say
also.
Mediterranean and interconnected seaways.
Yes, because Parker,
Yes.
he didn't present any shipwreck in the Atlantic, and nowadays we can do that. And it will
For
be-
French, it's quick done because we have only 2 ancient wrecks in the Atlantic Sea, and both transport or better. We only have ingots, some very little fragment of ceramic, and nothing else.
In our coast, we have mostly from Baetica shipwrecks.
Yeah.
It will be interesting. And another subject that you present, that I like it a lot, it's the commonwear, about commonwear. I mean, we have to change the way we look at the Amphora and the economy of Roman world, because we have to accept also that we have to include as a containers commonwear from Italy, from Baetica. Some years ago, I published with Inês some commonwear from Baetica, from Guadalquivir, and you were saying that maybe they were used to be as containers, to use it as containers. So, yes, transportation vessels. And now when we have analysis, chromatographical analysis on these pots from Baetica, from Italy, we found, we have a poster outside there that it says, it's for fish or oil or other products. So it will be very interesting at the end to cross all this information and not speak only about Amphora, because the commonwear come together with the Amphora.
Okay, some more remarks? Okay, so thank you very much for this so interesting paper. And we go to the next one, which is the last one of this session, and the last one before coffee. We will have our coffee at 6 o'clock, okay? Not at 7, at 6 o'clock.